Welcome to the Grappling Grappling Rewind Podcast.
Welcome to this week on the Grappling Rewind Podcast. On this week's show, we are going to talk about the main event for the UFC Fight Pass Invitational 10, headlined by Nick Rodriguez versus Victor Hugo. As always on the show, I'm your host, Mange, my co-host,
Miranda.
Hey, Miranda.
Pretty good. How are you?
We're doing good. Was doing a lot better until I realized right before we did the pre-roll for the show that the main event for this card that was going to be Theon Davies versus Adel Fornerino dropped out. So, not a lot going on this week. Pretty quiet week. Our plan initially for this show was like, hey, we have a phenomenal main event in the women's matchup between those two. Let's save that for next week because this card is 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
Let's then spend this show previewing Nick Rodriguez versus Victor Hugo. That's a great matchup. It's a 3-time rematch. Nick Rodriguez has not been able to beat Victor Hugo. Let's watch some tape on this match. Let's bring it in. We had a discussion right before CJI happened because these guys were on opposite sides of the bracket, most likely going to meet up in the finals. They did meet up on the finals. We've previewed this match before, but now with the new take of the last 6 months since CJI and about a year since the last match on Who's Number One, let's talk about it again. And then we went to pre-show and realized that we did all that and went, well, Theon's hurt. This is now the main event.
Yeah.
And we went, okay, so we're going to run with it. So next week, we're going to preview the rest of the card. Renato Canuto, Oliver Taza, Elizabeth Clay versus Brianna St. Marie, Ronaldo Jr. versus Felipe Costa, Andy Murasaki versus Daniel Sattler, Carissa Moria, Cassia Moria versus Sarah Galvao, Maggie Grindotti versus Helena Cravara, Achilles Rocha versus Nathan Haddad, Carlos Enrique versus Victor De Berrio. A literally phenomenal card. So I'm not too upset that next week when we're previewing those. A lot of those matchups all those matchups are phenomenal for their own reasons. So I'm excited to talk about those. But you're going to get the main event this week. And then next week on next week's show, we'll go through the rest of the card. Hopefully we have a replacement for Adele. But I doubt you're going to be able to find one of those in a week because there's only 3 other ladies that could really take her on. And spoiler, Elizabeth Kay and Brianna St. Marie are both on the card.
And I think Brianna St. Marie is now training with her.
Yeah, I don't think they'd fight each other with what it looks like given they're very frequently training together. Yeah. It doesn't seem like a matchup you could make. So Elizabeth Clay is already with Brianna St. Marie for this matchup.
Yeah.
The short list is very, very short. Again, Adele's an absolute champion ADCC.
Which is a weird size differential as I think about it now.
I think Brianna's bigger, and I think Elizabeth's gotten a little smaller since having a baby.
Maybe.
I don't know. Again, Elizabeth has really come down a weight over the years, and so I always remember her as a bigger competitor back when she was a little younger.
She's like a middleweight, and Brianna isn't a middleweight.
No, lightweight.
Yeah.
So regardless, not a whole lot else, but we do have some cool news for some other stuff. Miranda, you on the pre-show found that we have a really exciting card coming up for BJJ Stars at the Middleweight GP happening in April. We have a couple of names announced right now already. We have Oliver Taza, Jonathan Gracie, Elijah Dorsey, Azaki Bahens, and PJ Barch.
Yep.
That is a really exciting lineup for BJJ Stars. I'm really curious how they're going to bracket. It's an event that has historically been a very Brazilian-focused event.
Don't they do the hat?
Do they do the hat thing?
They do the hat. They put all the names in the hat, and then they pull the names out.
And then the first seed picks the seed.
Yeah. Right?
Was that BJJ Stars? They've done different things over the years.
I don't know.
But regardless, I like how they do it. So, yeah, it's...
There's the one where they say they pick the top so many seeds, and then the lower seeds get to pick who they want to go against. Yeah. And then there's the one where they have the hat, and they throw all the names in the hat. And I want to say...
For some reason, I think it's the lower seed one because... Super Smash Brothers tournaments will sometimes also do this.
Oh, okay.
And that's what I remember it from that, or I think making the parallel on the show versus that. But again, super fun names. It'll be really fun to see. Again, historically, a Brazilian-dominated event with not a whole lot of Americans or other people from other areas filling in. It is cool to have Elijah Dorsey, Oliver Taza, and PJ Barch all in that mix as well. Really exciting. Should be a super fun middleweight GP. Don't think PJ Barch is a middleweight, but again, that dude's always game, and he's looked, phenomenal recently.
But when you think about it, he fights at 77 kilograms, which is right under 180.
Oh, that is 86.
Which is right under 185 when you think about it.
I thought 77 was...
77 is 169. No, it's 170 something. 176. I'm looking at it.
Because 66 is 45, and then 77 is 69.
We're doing the math.
Yeah, we're doing the
right?
math.
Yeah, we're doing the math.
This has been a very long day.
169. You
Okay.
are correct. So 169 to 185, like
It's only 15 pounds.
yeah,
Keto
but
absolute.
yeah, but I bet you he cuts to make
Probably, yeah.
177.
Yeah,
so.
most of the guys at 77 are cutting down. You're not just
And he's
walking in
flying
that
to
way.
freaking Brazil, so he can
that
do
makes
whatever
sense.
he can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, so
You know.
that'll be exciting.
Because Dorsey's a 77 too.
Yeah, he is. Zaki Bahens and John Gracie are not.
Yeah.
So, but again, so that's coming up on March 6th. That's again a month and a plus from now. But very exciting to have those guys in that lineup. I don't think we have much else for previews other than like the main event dropping at a Fight Pass Invitational, which sucks because I've been excited since that got announced to see that rematch
I know
between
you
those
have.
two. So
You've been very excited about it.
I hope that Fionn heals up and then we get that rematch booked. But until then, oh no, we're gonna have to settle for Nick Rodriguez versus Victor Hugo. Let's go right into that. This is gonna be the entire show. We'd have a whole lot else to talk about. We have no other notes other than that. These guys, let me give you, if you have not seen the history or know the history between these two guys, let me give it to you. These guys have met 3 times. Victor Hugo has beat Nick Rodriguez by decision or by points all 3 times. First time they met was 2020. Fight to Win 135. Victor Hugo wins the decision. Very long time ago. It was about 2 months or 6 months after ADCC 2019, where Nick Rodriguez had that big breakout performance after winning trials. And it was really like his first foray into a lot of these big super fights after really showing up and getting a silver medal at ADCC 2019. Victor Hugo has been a world champion, and Victor Hugo primarily plays from the guard. Nick Rodriguez can't get a whole lot going. Victor Hugo wins the decision.
Yeah.
Okay. Next match happens on Third Coast Grappling in 2021. A little more than a year later.
Yeah.
About a year and 5 months later. Match, I remember watching it live. It's $15 to watch it again. We decided to not watch it again. It's on Fight TV if you want to watch it.
Yeah.
Third Coast Grappling 6. I recall this being a point victory for...
It was golden score, I think they said.
Golden score.
Which is points.
Sleeper,
It's first to points.
It was a very close match with Victor Hugo taking it at the end. I think by sweep is what it was, or by point. It was something that happened right at the end in the golden score. But I remember it being a very similar match with Nick Rodriguez trying to body lock Victor Hugo, not having a whole lot of success, and then Victor Hugo taking it. Again, I haven't watched the match in about 4 years, so I don't. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but that is what I remember the match being. But again, that was 4 years ago. These guys most recently met on Who's Number One? Who's Number 122. This is the main event of that card, and Victor Hugo takes a decision. We just watched that matchup and leading into this show, and I want to talk about it and break it down because not weirdly enough, the dynamic of the match from their first matchup at Fight to Win 135 back in 2020 to this match in 2024 with Nick Rodriguez, then after going and winning CJI, another ADCC title since then. Like there's been a lot. There's been a huge amount of development. This matchup functionally looks almost the same. There's been some technical improvements on either side for both Victor Hugo and for Nick Rodriguez, but it is Victor Hugo playing the big man, long, tall guard. Nick Rodriguez being unable to consistently pass, and really once he does pass, stabilize a position. And Victor Hugo being able to put up a little more submission offense, a little more frequently from the guard. And then late in the match, with about a minute left in both the Fight to Win match and the Who's Number One match, Nick Rodriguez going for a pretty decent looking footlock attempt that Victor Hugo defends, and then really nothing comes of it.
Yeah. And we've seen Victor Hugo have, the footlock problem.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Kennard in the first round of CJ, Lucas Kennard, at the first round of CJI was matched up as the 16th seed versus Victor Hugo, the 1 seed. And we went, okay, Kennard was a late replacement, replaced Mason Fowler.
Well, I don't think it was a 16-1 seed. Remember, they did the whole golf ball thing.
Oh, yeah, okay.
They put the golf balls in the
now.
thing,
Yep.
and they had to pull the golf balls out. It just worked that way that it was.
Kennard was a lower seed in that tournament, and Hugo was favored to win because again, Nick Rodriguez
I think
was on the
they
other side.
seeded like the first half, and then everybody else was a ping pong ball.
Yeah, they put the corners in, I think, is what it was.
Or the corners,
That's what it was. And we were at it live, And it was awesome. And we were like, okay, Victor Hugo's, the guy that is favored to win because he has 3 wins at this point over Nick Rodriguez. And then Lucas Kennard comes in and hits what was possibly the sub of the year.
Yeah.
A really quick heel hook on Victor Hugo. And we speculated a lot. Was like, Victor Hugo not ready? Did he kind of overlook him? Did he look through him?
The guard that Victor Hugo plays, if he doesn't protect that top foot, he's going to get foot locked.
Yeah. And we have seen that or attempted by Nick Rodriguez in every match.
Yeah.
Late in the match, Rodriguez goes and guns for something. And Hugo, there's an interesting wrinkle in Hugo's game that I think is Hugo, like we talked about PJ Barch here in the opening. PJ Barch is one of the best counter foot lockers in jiu-jitsu. Like you go for his leg, PJ Barch will go, and pretty frequently counter leg lock you to victory. Finish you. Like we saw it at Polaris Squads. We've seen it at ADCC versus Elijah Dorsey. Also in that tournament at BJJ Stars coming up. Like Elijah Dorsey's going for a foot lock. PJ Barch looks at him and goes, okay, and finishes a foot lock on Elijah Dorsey. Victor Hugo, when Nick Rodriguez goes for the foot lock, again, typically comes late. Victor Hugo knows he's probably ahead on the cards. But in general, Victor Hugo doesn't tend to play a counter foot lock game.
He does not.
He will almost more traditional, like kind of an old school way, kind of defend the foot lock, get back to his preferred guard, or move back through a position, maybe take a position off of it. But typically, especially versus Nick Rodriguez, Hugo will roll through for the toe hold attempt we saw late in the Who's Number One match and the heel hook attempt we saw in the Fight to Win match, again, 5 years ago at this point. Hugo rolls through, rolls back into the guard, puts Nick Rodriguez back into either the closed guard or back into the knee shield, typically back into the closed guard because it's late into the match, and then that's the match. All of the footlock attempts that Nick Rodriguez has had versus Victor Hugo haven't been bad.
But they haven't been super controlled either because you almost have to hit it so fast that he doesn't respond to it happening.
Yeah, kind of like what happened with Kennard, where Kennard kind of just, I think, literally surprised Victor Hugo with the footlock attempt. And we watched it again and we went, does Hugo have an existing injury? Because Hugo taps very quickly to that heel hook coming on with Kennard. And like there was...
And there could have been a previous injury, one. And two, it could have just been...
Could have been that spot.
Because you're not thinking about that. It's just one thing that you're just not paying attention to.
You have a big dude ripping a foot. Again, taking nothing... really attempting here to take nothing away from Lucas Kennard or Victor Hugo in that match.
Yeah.
Like, these guys are some of the best in the world. You get got sometimes.
And it happens,
it's kind of the nature of the game. But in watching it back, we've all been a little... surprised at how quickly Victor Hugo tapped to that because like it's a little at this level for a world champion level guy like Victor Hugo. It's just typically those guys like there's usually a more protracted fight for longer, and Kennard gets him, locks it up, and just finishes Hugo's out of the tournament. I don't know if Nick Rodriguez can replicate what Lucas Kennard did, but interesting wrinkle, Lucas Kennard trains at a B team.
He does.
Or at the time, at least, trained at a B team. So that's very interesting to think about is like Victor Hugo very much has had Nick Rodriguez's number. They have 3 matchups that have always gone Victor Hugo's way by golden score or by decision. Now, they've also had another match that fell through. They were bracketed on opposite sides of CJI for the $1 million cash prize. You know that Nick Rodriguez in that camp, that whole camp was preparing to take on Victor. All the big guys in that room, they were either training partners of Nick Rodriguez or that were in that bracket as well, were training to take out Victor Hugo.
Yeah.
So it is interesting now that camp has had a whole cycle of working to fight Victor Hugo with Nick Rodriguez.
And you would also hope that somebody watches the matches and realizes that, the body lock pass that Nicky Rod is trying is not working.
Yeah.
That you need, and when you watched it, if Nicky Rod puts the attempted footlock together with a pass in like a mid-range, then he can get past, and he does get past. Mm-hmm. The problem is then, once you're past, is what do you do?
Yeah, because every time he gets past, we see Victor Hugo basically what I call the Derek Lewis. He just either gets under your armpits or on your hips. And he rolls over the side. He bench press. I mean, he repeatedly in the Who's Number One match, which is the match I want to talk about the most because it's the most relevant. The other matches were at this point years ago, and Nick Rodriguez really doesn't look as much like the same guy. He does a lot of the same tendencies, but the technical development he has is way. We're talking about a guy that was a purple belt versus a guy that is now a black belt. And, like, again, at the level he competes at, it's different. But if you look at the depth of technical advancement that he's made, doesn't look like the same guy technically.
Yeah.
Victor Hugo just goes and pushes him off every time consistently. And he uses a couple of different techniques. I don't know if Nick Rodriguez will learn how to row drag in those spaces, or if where Victor Hugo is keeping his hands to push Nick Rodriguez off in those spaces, if is a position that Rodriguez could actually kind of row drag from, like, because you have to press the hand over in order to stop it, but there is
or attack the arm from, if it's a position where you can just jump an arm, but because some people, do that, it would at least, like, you might not get the arm, but it might create a little bit of a scramble and get him in a worse position, and you in a better position.
Maybe force Victor Hugo to turtle, or give him something else. Like, so let's kind of go. Let's pull it back. So unless you have a piece you want to make now, let's pull it back a step. The Who's Number One match, the most recent one that happened in 2024. Primarily Victor Hugo from the guard, not as much from the close guard, more from the knee shield. Hugo pulls early, he plays the knee shield. Nick Rodriguez, for the rounds, it's 50-minute match, and it's broken up into 3 periods with no break between, and the match is judged in an aggregate as a whole, but the judges award favor for stuff. Nick Rodriguez early, good pressure passing down, knee shield, mid-range, putting good pressure and forcing Victor Hugo to kind of like recompose his guard, but no really, really strong passing attempts.
But if you watch Victor Hugo pays attention to that outside arm as he passes, as he tries to attack. And as I think about it, that's probably how, if you're going to footlock Victor Hugo, because he's going for your outside arm, it means his topside foot is there to leg lock. Because that's the topside foot. If you don't control the hand or the body towards your topside foot, that's when you're getting leg locked from the top.
And that's sort of what Nick Rodriguez will throw. Is like he'll throw that topside foot lock, either the heel hook or the ankle. He usually throws us a heel hook. He'll sometimes throw a toe hold. We'll get to the toe hold at the end here. But we have one good omoplata footlock knee bar attempt from Victor Hugo. Like less than a minute before the judges give their favor, and you have 5 minutes or 4 minutes of Nick Rodriguez pressuring, but not really getting a whole lot done, but still winning the pressure exchanges, followed by one good submission chain, not just one off, a submission chain from Victor Hugo late in that first period of the match.
Get more than one, too.
Yeah, it's a chain. It was like...
No, but I mean, I think you get that chain, and then I think you get a second chain at one point.
Maybe. I thought the first one was only like one quick chain. It was like an omoplata attempt to an arm bar and then to a knee bar. Yeah. And then he kind of spun it out, and Rodriguez kind of pulled out of the whole thing. But it was like, okay, it was a chain that involved multiple layers of defense. Yeah. Again, the fight to win criteria. A submission attack that requires a defense is what's going to score. In similar in that era for Who's Number One, that's sort of what they were looking for. So then the judge's favor goes to Hugo, and you're like, okay, I like the pressuring attempt from Rodriguez early, but he didn't put up any submission offense, and Hugo has a couple things that Rodriguez very much has to have some big defense on. It completely pulls out of the range in order to reset. Okay, reasonable to give to Hugo.
And I think there's a few times after that where Hugo is kind of inverting into knee bars. He might not be getting an actual knee bar attempt out of it, but at least he's getting some kind of action on the bottom that's constantly making Nicky Rod have to kind of like pull himself, like...
reset out of the position completely. Yeah,
exactly.
For a second. Yeah, there you go.
I tried.
The audio form looks good still.
Yeah.
Later in the match, we have another big attempt. They go to the close guard, and then Victor Hugo throws up a super hard triangle armbar combination that literally goes belly down Nick Rodriguez. Nick Rodriguez, much like his brother, phenomenal defense. Gets out.
I don't know how everybody, both him and his brother, do the whole like belly down, but then they look the wrong direction to get out of it.
It's like a reverse hitchhiker, essentially.
Yeah, man.
If you watch Jay talk about it, and other people have broken this down a little more, they never stop moving. Like they're never statically fighting an armbar. Yeah. They are always consistently moving, rolling, and as a result, it makes it hard to kind of hold on and like roll with it to keep it. Like you have to break it dynamically, and pretty much no one is able to do that because they're moving so much. You have to anticipate where they're moving their whole body and adjust, and almost no one can make the guess correctly for where they're going to move, which is, again, a credit to the defense, but it also goes, okay, you have some good passing attempts and maybe one good north-south pass to almost getting belly down armbarred by Victor Hugo. Okay, that's another period of the match that you're going to pretty much score for Victor Hugo.
Yeah.
It's like, why? Because you have an overwhelming, almost finishing move that takes place in the match versus good passing. Maybe you get past. Third period comes on.
Yeah.
Nick Rodriguez, good. He starts to show the back of Victor Hugo a little bit. He pins the shoulder. He's got good pressure. We're starting to see Victor Hugo now get a little less diligent with, early in the match, he's completely controlling Nick Rodriguez's arm that's facing him. So if they're in the knee shield, Victor Hugo puts his hands out in front of him. Nick Rodriguez wants the body lock pass. So he's going to loop over in front, and Victor Hugo, the entirety of the first 10 minutes of the match, consistently has a wrist grip, has a hand grip, even will actually have a grip behind the elbow to pull the elbow away, to never let Nick Rodriguez lock his hands underneath him. Later in the match, about 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes left, we see Victor Hugo start to turn, kind of make a bad turtle attempt. Nick Rodriguez gets around. He shelves the legs in front. He doesn't actually do the body lock pass that we see him do. He sort of just catches Victor Hugo regarding, I'm not going to say a lazy regard, but he kind of stifles his regard, and then he's able to get past. And then we're like, cool, Nick Rodriguez has passed. Can he do something with this? And Victor Hugo just goes, I've decided to not be inside control anymore.
I'm going to push your hips away from me now.
And he pushes on the hips, pushes on the shoulders, and he resets them in guard. And that was most of the match. Last minute of the match, we're like, okay, well, it's been pretty clearly Victor Hugo winning this match the entire time. What does Nick Rodriguez have to do? He has to finish probably here. And so Nick Rodriguez knows that. He grabs a power hold on Victor Hugo. And it's like, okay. And you see the camera angle is great for it. Rips it down, but he does it without any knee control from Victor Hugo. So Victor Hugo goes, oh, that's tight. Rolls through twice, comes back to the guard, and really nothing comes of that. It was a submission attempt that required defense. Yeah. Definitely a scoring submission.
But it's also one of those weird ones where it causes you to defend, but it doesn't cause you to super defend.
Well, it's like Victor Hugo has to just roll through, and then he's back in his guard. And I was like, it was more of that was inconvenient.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like a submission where you literally have to fight.
Completely abandon the position that you're like the arm bars earlier. Victor Hugo was throwing up. Nick Rodriguez really has to abandon position completely. Everything he's doing to get out and 100% escape. Victor Hugo just sort of has to invert through the guard, and then he's there.
And I find that's a problem, a weird problem that a lot of people have with, or that rule set has with toe holds and leg locks, is that if you know how to game the system, you can make it look like it's not as bad as it actually is. You know what I mean?
And on the other end, you can make an ankle lock look like, I'm going for the ankle lock, and is it good? And that's it's this weird. Footlocks have always been this weird judgment call from a referee. And again, as a judge, it's horrible to try to make that. You have to play a guessing game like we were talking about last week. Matej Szczynski. The dude looks like a regular ankle lock. Everyone taps to that super quickly because there's something special about it.
I found the instructionals on that.
Did you?
Yeah.
I'm very curious about this now.
That and the arm bar, because I wanted the arm bar, which is so easy because I've been hitting it. It's freaking good, wonderful.
But again, you have I'm looking at Matej Szczynski's footlock, and I'm like, it's a regular ankle lock, and guys, he's breaking guys' feet.
He does a really weird. With him, he angles his hips in a way that once he pushes on your leg, it's like
it's breaking.
It's a different angle than traditionally they taught you to do it. It's a weird hip position. It's definitely different, and it definitely seems to. It makes it almost so as soon as you touch because he concentrates on the toes under your arm rather than grabbing the heel, and because of that, literally you push down on the toes and it's there before you even you can do it one-handed.
It's interesting. But
it's really crazy. But anyway,
it's a good point. But if you talk about for judging, it's like they look very similar. but Mateusz Szczęsny is breaking your foot in half versus this.
Yeah.
It's a really impressive toe hold from Nick Rodriguez. Like, it looks impressive. He has to roll the way through. But if you look at like where Victor Hugo's knees are, where Nick Rodriguez's knees are, like, well, there's not really control in the knee. You can't stop the inversion. You couldn't, unless you can just flash break the foot, which is kind of what it does to Gordon Ryan. There's not really any mechanics there for you to keep putting more pressure into it. And so it makes it this weird kind of gray area of judging where it's like, it's a good sub, but...
And we have a seasoned competitor that's not going to panic tap when it happens and is going to actually get out of it, then it's not as...
It brings me back to that one piece, though. It's like the CJI match with Lucas Kennard.
Yeah.
You make me go, well... Victor Hugo has been consistently able, to the technique he applies, to the way he stops the body lock pass, to the range he plays the guard, to the way he escapes the passing, has been consistently able to get out of Nick Rodriguez's like game every time. And every match, Rodriguez has thrown this Hail Mary footlock attempt at the end that Victor Hugo has just defended. With the match with Kennard, you're like, maybe there is something there that really, the dynamics of this match don't have to change. And because we've been having the same match for 4 or 5 years at this point, essentially, it makes you kind of wonder, like, well, I doubt Nick Rodriguez is going to drastically change his game. Has he become a better body lock passer? Absolutely. Is Victor Hugo also in the room with Lovato and Sanji and Felipe Costa and like a bunch of other unnamed big guys that are phenomenal black belts in that room? Like, yeah, Victor Hugo has also probably been improving versus big, strong body lockers, much like Rodriguez, and has a very diligent game to stop that and work through that. It adds this X factor. Like, I'm gonna say here in the show, I think Victor Hugo should most likely be able to beat Nick Rodriguez if we see the match that we have seen for the last 4 and 5 years.
If he doesn't stand at a mid-range to pass and just continues to try to body lock and pressure pass, we're going to have the same match.
Which Victor Hugo historically has always won. Now, if Rodriguez can force a mid-range, he can prevent Hugo from getting under him. He can prevent the knee bar attempts, which are there, which Hugo is very good at. He can counter footlock a little bit, which Victor Hugo tends to not do. Rodriguez can counter footlock off of Hugo, which Hugo tends to not love. Yeah. And if potentially Rodriguez can get Hugo to overcommit, I mean, and then end of the match for who's number one as well. Victor Hugo ended on Nick Rodriguez's back. Ended up almost taking his back at the end there. I kind of forgot that piece as well. That sealed the match. Yeah. It wasn't really relevant at that point, but it sealed the match. If Rodriguez can do what he did about midway through that match and kind of half-turn Victor Hugo and prevent Victor Hugo from getting back flat to the mat, there is an avenue for Rodriguez to take this match. But everything we've seen, not everything, a lot of what we've seen prior to these guys matching up is like, well, these are sort of the dynamics of the match. As Hugo plays that guard, Rodriguez really only has 2 or 3 different passes that he wants to work. He has nuance in the way that he does them, and he's gotten much, much better as a passer. I mean, go back and watch the Fight to Win 135 match. Yeah. Like, Rodriguez's passing game is like a flash pass, and that's primarily what he's got. He can't get that going versus the close guard of Victor Hugo. And then you go back and watch him at CGI. You go back and watch him at ADCC. You go back and watch him, like... run his passing game.
But you might also get Victor Hugo that plays the regular game and then 2 minutes before the end pulls him into full guard and just holds him there.
Yeah.
Because like that would be the way to handle it, because you know he's going to try to do that at the end, right?
I'm going to ask you blank here right now. Do you know what the new rules Fight Pass Invitational is using? Do you remember if it's points? Do you remember if it's like...
Isn't it sub only and then it goes to points in overtime?
Okay, I think that's what they're using now.
Yeah.
Again, they have moved so many things. Yeah, no,
it's sub only and then it goes into points.
So kind of like ADCC, if ADCC instead of halfway through the match switch to points at the end. Again, it's kind of a format I like. It lets the guys that want to play sub only do whatever they want, and then it lets guys that have a game that is more reliant on points be required to weather that storm and then need to score late when both guys are tired. When honestly, you're more likely to see scores anyway. Yeah. So I kind of do like where it's going,
unless they change the rules
they
again.
Do frequently. But let's work on the assumption that those are the rules. with that being put into perspective, the last time we saw this was at Third Coast Grappling, where it was a golden score for Victor Hugo. Do we think that Nick Rodriguez will change his game, be able to get that goal?
Yeah,
get those points
I don't
late?
know if it was a golden score or not.
I think it was a golden score.
I swear I read that somewhere.
Yeah,
but
I think it was a golden score, or it was a decision based on something. It was
But-
for Victor Hugo, and pretty clear. I remember being pretty clear for Victor Hugo.
Yeah.
I remember not being happy about it.
Yeah.
But going like, nah, I can see Victor Hugo winning that. Do we think that Nick Rodriguez, again, he does tend to get past, or in the last match, he was able to get past late. Now, again, it's who's number one. The positional game doesn't really matter if there are strong sub attempts, and if you're able to sustain. In the Fight Pass Invitational, it might matter. Rodriguez has improved as a passer versus Victor Hugo, versus everyone, and he has improved his dynamics of what he can do. Like he is. If he can get to the body lock, which I kind of think he might be able to get to the body lock versus Victor Hugo this time. He's going to look at the match. He's going to realize the range. You look at how he dealt with Mason Fowler. Mason Fowler, again, plays a much smaller man's version. Again, much smaller in stature to Victor Hugo. But Rodriguez really figured that out. Not quickly, but figured it out consistently. And was able to really outpoint Mason Fowler. Again, Mason Fowler's doesn't have the size, doesn't have the attributes that Victor Hugo has, but still a really, really good competitor, just a little bit undersized, even though they're close to the same size. Like, Hugo's stature is a big man. He plays big man jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Do we think that Rodriguez can score, or do we think that Victor Hugo will be able to score a back take, or will be able to get his own score, a sweep off late?
I think it's Victor Hugo's game unless we go late. And if we go late, it becomes Nicky Rod's game.
It leans more
because
toward Rodriguez.
It seems like Victor Hugo, over time, gets a little more worn than Nick Rodriguez does.
Yeah, the pacing. Hugo tends to fade a little in these long paced matches. I think this is a 12-minute match, probably.
Yeah.
Something
but then we have the match with him and Big Dan. Remember him versus Big Dan?
Where late Big Dan got a little tired, and Victor Hugo was like, "It's my time."
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden turned on the afterburners.
And
was
that
like,
one. So maybe you have a situation where Victor Hugo knows now, like, I got to turn it up.
Yeah, and knows he has to like pull deep. And again, versus Big Dan. Big Dan's a bigger statured guy than even Nick Rodriguez, and for him to be able to late push Big Dan. And also, I think Big Dan is not as experienced of a competitor as Nick Rodriguez either. But again, you have your weight to throw on. Big Dan, his game is built to beat big guys.
Yeah.
We see him do it. Like, honestly, he tends to struggle with the smaller guys more than the big guys.
And Big Dan wasn't able to footlock Victor Hugo.
And Big Dan's game is Big Dan's game is footlocking big guys. So that's, again, it's also something you really are worried about with Big Dan versus Nick Rodriguez. I'm not really that worried about his footlock game generally.
My only thing that I do have to say with that caveat is can Nick Rodriguez hold him for a 3 count to actually get the points?
I think he can for a 3 count.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is I think he can get him for a 3 count. Now, if we're 5 or 8 count, I don't know.
Or is this going to be a long 3?
1, 2.
Yeah. I mean,
2.5.
it is Victor Hugo.
3. Again, you have good cornermen.
Yeah.
Your cornermen are going to fight for it. There's a lot. There are more X factors in this match as kind of the more we think about it. I think on paper, this should be the same match that we've seen from these guys 3 times. Rodriguez pressuring on the top, Hugo playing a great long man guard, guard.
Yeah, and I think we'll also see who's done their homework.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really, honestly, the onus here is for Nick Rodriguez to have done his homework.
Yeah.
I am curious with that whole camp kind of studying to beat Victor Hugo in CJI, but also you have the entire Victor Hugo camp studying to beat Nick Rodriguez multiple times. The interesting thing is, I think the problem, and I continue to go Victor Hugo here. Again, I love to see Nick Rodriguez win.
Yeah.
I like Nick Rodriguez. I find his game really interesting. I find him...
Victor Hugo has not lost very much.
No. But Victor Hugo's game to beat Nick Rodriguez here, Victor Hugo just has to be Victor Hugo. Yeah. He just has to do what he has always done successfully, what he has always done well. Nick Rodriguez has to make big improvements, and do things that we haven't necessarily seen him. We've never seen him be able to do consistently to Victor Hugo. I think that's the biggest thing where, in my head, this is not an odd matchup, a really tough uphill matchup for Nick Rodriguez, where it's like I'm inclined to pick Victor Hugo because, well, he's shown us he can do it. The points at the end are the only thing that make me kind of wonder. It's like, we know Victor Hugo in that Big Dan match can really hit the gas if need be and score those points and make it happen. We also know Nick Rodriguez can work really well in bursts.
But we haven't seen him do that against Nick Rodriguez.
But he's never needed to, which is an interesting thing as well. Again, the third
true,
match,
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
He's never really needed to.
And that's also something we really don't see a ton usually from Victor Hugo. Like, I don't know him as like a big burst guy late at the end. Again, I can think of a couple matches where it's happened.
Yeah.
But usually it's because the other guy is initiating a scramble. Like, Victor Hugo was doing that off of a huge overcommitment from Big Dan. And Big Dan just kind of blowing through the last remaining of his cardio and just becoming exhausted in trying to overwhelm Victor Hugo. Like, it was a strategic move that Victor Hugo was able to capitalize on and then really like take the match away from it. Nick Rodriguez late will have those explosive moments, and I think, honestly, on paper, this matchup is a lot closer with that late points option. I don't think Victor Hugo subs Nick Rodriguez.
No.
I think we see him enter subs, but I think Nick Rodriguez's sub game, his submission defense game has gotten very good, and it has continued to get very good. He is very hard to, put away. The last guy I think we saw subbing was it Gordon in 2022? The heel hook at ECC. Like, I think that is the last guy we've seen sub Nick Rodriguez. And then we saw Kynan in 2019.
Yeah.
Heel hook him. But, like, Nick Rodriguez doesn't get finished very often. It is by heel hook by the two best guys in the world.
Or by decision. Yeah.
I mean, he'll lose
a decision
here or there, but
he doesn't
pretty rare.
But he generally doesn't lose by submissions.
Gordon and Kynan are the only guys I can think of that he lost by sub. And it was like, oh yeah, the best guy that's maybe ever done it, and the only other guy that's the second best guy that's ever done it.
Yeah, and we have Nicky Rod versus Kynan coming up too in the future.
Is that who's number one?
Yes, it is.
Ooh, I forgot about that.
See, it says right there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, remember they announced it at the last who's number one.
Oh, they did, didn't they?
Yeah.
That's a good match. That's honestly that's a fun matchup.
Yeah.
And again, that'll be another 3-peat.
Yeah.
So this is a fourth match. That'll be a third match.
Well, this is Nicky Rod going against everyone who's beat him.
The Revenge Tour.
Yeah.
I love a good combat sports revenge tour.
Yeah.
He's getting better. He's making improvements. It's a match that usually for these matches where it's like, I wouldn't spend a whole day on this. I wouldn't have whole topic for the show if I didn't think there was a substantial chance that Nick Rodriguez could beat Victor Hugo. We go, yeah, man, we've seen it 3 times. He'll beat him on the 4th. But there's enough kind of X factors and time between these matches and changes that make me kind of, and the rule set for Fight Pass Invitational with those points being available late make me kind of put Nick Rodriguez as a bit more of a live dog in this than because now in the other rule sets, he kind of was required to submit Victor Hugo or get his back and have some overwhelming level of positional offense that I've never known Victor Hugo to ever get put on him.
Yeah.
If there's any guy that could do it, Nick Rodriguez could do it. But Victor Hugo historically, unless you're like Gordon, doesn't get out-positioned by guys. Doesn't get, you don't spend time on his back very frequently. Every other rule set, he has to do that. You either got to flash sub him or you got to out-position him. It's like, okay, Victor Hugo's a hard guy to do that for. With the points, Nick Rodriguez does have an avenue for victory here. Like Victor Hugo, he's going to pull.
Yeah.
He's not going to wrestle with you, so that's not an avenue for points.
So he's going to have to sweep you.
He's going to have to sweep Nick Rodriguez, which I think is a monster. I don't see. I think I would venture that Victor Hugo is much more likely to take Nick Rodriguez's back, like he almost did at the Who's Number One match, versus sweeping Nick Rodriguez.
I wonder this. The other wrinkle you could add into it would be if Nicky Rod goes for an ankle lock and Victor Hugo sits up, does he get 2 for the sweep? And does Nicky Rod sweep himself, not thinking he swept
himself? Is it the ADCC rule where it's like if you are the one that initiates the position, you don't get swept?
Because I could see with Nicky Rodriguez liking to jump the footlock attempt at the end,
especially late.
He goes and does that late. Victor Hugo sits up, does his 2 count or 3 count or whatever.
Gets his points, and that's the match.
Gets his points, and then there you go.
Yeah. So what do you think? You think Victor Hugo takes it on decision? You think he takes it on points? You think he takes it by sub? The more we talk about the points, the more I think that late surge from Rodriguez may get it done with a pass.
I think if it's within the general time, then it's Hugo. I think if it goes into overtime, it's Rodriguez.
You're going to go Rodriguez now?
I'll go for Rodriguez for overtime.
Yeah, Rodriguez overtime.
Just because,
by points? By pass?
By overtime. Yeah, by points.
Yeah.
Just because...
I hate that I've kind of talked myself into this a little bit.
But at the same time, I could see Nicky Rod sweeping himself and Victor Hugo getting those points if that rule exists.
Yeah. I can also see a wrestle up where Nick Rodriguez forces Victor Hugo to wrestle up.
Yeah.
Or where in an attempt here, Nick Rodriguez is able to wrestle up on Victor Hugo and then have it be nothing.
Yeah, because wrestle ups, depending on your
there's not enough of a guard established for it to count. I see that going there.
And if something like that happens, watch it. It's going to be like the end of the world, and everybody's going to get mad, just kind of like every other match.
I hate that now I see Nick Rodriguez by points late.
Yeah,
like that is such. But
it's the truth.
But what's it? Because
that's
such a different rule set.
Because that's when he starts. Mm-hmm. But in all honesty, Victor Hugo's team should see this also.
Yeah,
and they should know, hey, we need to start killing him late.
I think Victor Hugo is able to score on Nick Rodriguez. Okay. I think he gets a score. I don't know if he can stabilize it, but I think he gets a score, and then I think he goes back to his guard.
Okay.
I think it's either a sweep or it is, he does something to keep Nick Rodriguez's posture down. He's going to get him in the full guard at one point.
I mean, and that would be the...
And that would be the avenue to get the sweep, to go for the triangle, to go for the sweep. Off that, and you get top position some way, and then you have to be able to wrestle Nick Rodriguez down to get your points. Victor Hugo might be able to do that, or force attack, or force hey, Victor Hugo enters on a knee bar, Nick Rodriguez does the running man out, Victor Hugo chases him down, either turns into a hip. If he can keep Nick Rodriguez's leg, which he can because he's tall enough, a lot of guys won't be able to. Victor Hugo will have the arm length to be able to grab on top of the knee to prevent Nick Rodriguez from pulling out completely, especially if he stands up over him. Victor Hugo can go to the X guard, pull him over, kick him over, get those 2 points that way. I just see Hugo's guard being a reliable way, even though he really hasn't shown us that in recent matches versus Rodriguez, a reliable way for him to be able to score points if needed on Rodriguez, and Rodriguez now has that pass late, which he can get. We know he can get. Yeah. But if Victor Hugo is diligent and prevents Rodriguez from stabilizing it, well, I think it's a close match. I'm going Victor Hugo on this. Do you have any other kind of pieces that you haven't... any other wrinkles that we haven't brought into this?
I don't think so. They can pull. I'm pretty sure they can
pull with contact now. Yeah. I think is what it is. I don't think the pull rule is going to be a problem here. We may get into some weird penalties here and there because Fight Pass is a bit consistent. Ooh,
there's the penalty issue.
Let's talk about that now.
Yeah.
So the stalling
penalty issue.
It's not like it was that one card.
Yeah.
But they are more. Oh, there's another wrinkle to it.
They're also more diligent.
They're more diligent about stalling from top and from bottom.
Yeah.
I am curious. I know that if Nick Rodriguez plays this like he played the Who's Number One matchup, where he plays the first 4 minutes in that knee cut, pressing and through, he will get hit with penalties there.
Yeah, he will.
Definitely. Now, I don't think Nick Rodriguez cares about that. And Nick Rodriguez
but that
will play however he will.
But that puts you points behind going into.
Yeah. I think that also the slowness of Hugo's game.
But
I think
Hugo does enough activity that he doesn't get called for stalling.
He's slow.
Yeah.
But he still has enough activity to his guard. He's still doing stuff. He'll cross you over. He'll push on your hips. He'll push on your chest. He'll still be active enough. I'm curious. Victor Hugo plays just active enough that I think he'll get warned, but I don't know if he will get called because I think his camp, Sanji, Lovato, Felipe Costa, the guys that are usually in his corner there at these big events, I think they will be knowledgeable enough about what the referees do. Because again, Sanji's good at that. Like, he looks at the referee, he does what you want from a world champion level coach.
They wonderfully shot to him in the middle of Nicky Rod's attempt to leg lock.
I know.
Victor
I hated
Hugo
that.
at one
Here's
point.
one. Nicky Rod jumps back for a heel hook. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then they cut to Sanji, and they cut back. Nick Rodriguez is on the bottom, like, fighting. I was like, I would have loved to see how that sequence played. They do that when they're in the guard. Never, that'll be my rant here. If you are ever broadcasting a match, never take away from the action of the match. Always have a match. If you ever want to show something else, give me a picture-in-picture.
Yeah.
But really, there's never a good time for a picture-in-picture during a match.
Unless it's two guys fighting in a closet.
It's two guys. No. I will stand my foot down. We're talking about who's next final, which is Isaac Michelle versus Kyle Chambers.
Yeah,
where they put him in a broom closet, and I was like, "Hey man, I'm already 2 hours into this match,
and it's dark.
Just let me watch the whole match. I'm already committed here for it. Don't bring Gordon Ryan out now. Like, I'll watch him when I watch him.
Yeah.
You've already made me sit through 45 minutes of this match.
They didn't give you proper lighting, so you couldn't watch it anyway.
Keep going. Just watch the whole thing. Yeah, and we learned there. Maybe don't put your co-main event as a no time limit match.
Yeah.
When it can go for 3 hours.
Because it will.
Because no time limit matches can go for as long as they need to go for.
We've also learned that, reffing bluebells.
Yeah, there's that.
That also happens.
My rant is not a rant. Victor Hugo's team is phenomenal, and I think his team will keep him informed about the level of activity that he needs. He's a world level competitor. I mean, Nick Rodriguez is too. Yeah. But the coaching acumen that we know will be in Victor Hugo's corner is world-class and top level. Nick Rodriguez will have a lot of the really high-level competitors from B team that know. Then again, take nothing away from the coach that he would have in his corner. But Sanji is a legend that has been there for a very long time at the highest levels, the world championship levels, as a competitor and as a coach. There is just more depth of experience there when looking at the nuances of rule sets. Like, he's just had a decade more of doing it than the coaches that Rodriguez will most likely have in his corner. Again, taking nothing away from either team. It's just Hugo, with that being said, Hugo will most likely be informed to an extent that will let him not get hit with penalties if that is not a tactical strategy that his team wishes to put in there.
I agree.
So I think, the penalties, I go Hugo. I'm going to go Hugo. I think Rodriguez will play a little bit more slowly at the beginning and will happily take a penalty or two.
But that becomes a problem.
And that becomes a problem late, because then Victor Hugo, again, Rodriguez, I think, gets those points back because he has to put motion on. But I think overall that Hugo will do enough there to stay ahead and stay active to prevent that from being a problem. So I'm going to go Victor Hugo on points here, possibly on penalties. But look out for a good match. Maria, do you have any other thoughts kind of closing on this match?
I don't think so.
So that's the that's the card. Sorry, that's the main event of the card now. Again, unfortunately, the ladies' match fell through. Would love to see a rematch between Fionn Davies and Adele Fornerino. That is the women's match to make in the sport. That is one of the top matches in the sport, regardless of men or women's matches to make. That's the one I wanted to see. As soon as it happened to ADCC and Adele won, I was like, I want to see Fionn and her go again. Let's redo it. It was 2022. 2025 is a different time. 3 years later, or 2.5 years later. Especially now that we have seen so much more from Adele Fornerino on the UFC side. Yeah. Like, we're seeing, she was in, whose corner was she in? Was it Izzy? No, it wasn't Izzy's.
No, Brianna St. Marie.
They were both in the corner though. They were at a UFC recently, and they were both in someone's corner.
A UFC like a fight?
Yeah, like a fight.
Oh, I don't know.
I think they were in they were on Weili Zhang's corner.
Yeah, well, they're Atos, right?
I believe
no,
so.
The fighter that you're talking about is Atos.
I don't know
because I think she's Chinese.
Yes.
She is normally coached by Hanger.
Oh,
because Hanger is normally with her.
Yes, you're right.
So it's an Atos thing.
Okay.
They both and at least the last time I saw, Porterino was at Atos.
Okay, that makes sense.
Brianna
she is Atos. Yeah. So it was cool
that all
to see
makes
them
sense
coach
then,
her to another world title.
Just because really cool. I remember seeing videos of him there with her for a long time.
Yeah. So again, Sucks, but we will definitely get it. An organization is, if the UFC is going to put it together, that puts a mark on that card. Hey, man, an organization will put it together. Hey, Polaris will put it together. Grapple Fest will put it together. Who's number one will put it together. Someone will put that matchup together, and I will get that matchup.
CGI will put it together.
CGI, yeah. Hey, man, Theon, come back. Like, let's take Adele, too, and bring her back in there. I would love to see that in a pit. That'd be an awesome matchup. Again, it doesn't matter where that matchup happens. It's going to be awesome. Again, the whole card looks great. We're going to see Elizabeth Clay versus Brana St. Marie, Renato Canuto versus Oliver Taza. Again, speaking of this Team Six Blades, we have Felipe Costa there versus Ronaldo Jr.
Yep.
So that will be fun. We'll preview all of those next week. We talked about them earlier in the show. Miranda, you've had a very busy day today. Any kind of closing thoughts for the outro before we kind of adjourn a little shorter of a show this week?
No, I got up at 4 o'clock this morning to go to the U.S. Supreme Court and wait outside for hours to go watch an argument. It took a very long time.
Yeah.
So I'm sleepy.
Did a bunch of filler today. So yeah, we'll close it out. You have anything fun going on this week other than that? You're just the one day, right? You're not going tomorrow.
No, I'm working from home tomorrow.
Okay.
No, I'm going to try to arm lock everyone that tries to do anything.
I've been watching the Mateusz Szczynski arm lock versus PJ Barch.
I have it. It's very easy.
I made you show me because I've been playing with it. I was like, "Ooh, this looks really good," because I realized that I can play an outside guard, kind of like Szczynski plays. And I went, "Oh, people tend to really like to post exactly where Barch posted. There might be an avenue for like a really sneaky arm lock to get."
It's you just countering a post. That's all you're doing, and it's I like it a lot.
One of my favorite things on this show is getting to watch and then talk about technique and then bounce off stuff with the co-host.
Well, then he also has a whole like series system. Like if they do this, you do this, and if you do this, they do this.
He has a system.
He has a whole thing about it. Yeah, it's a whole thing.
I love talking about stuff on the show and then going back in the training room and going, "Oh, there's an opportunity for that thing I just saw the guy do." Yeah. And whoever I'm training with, because again, 8 people watch jiu-jitsu generally. Yeah. Whoever I'm training with doesn't know it's a thing, and I get to just kind of throw it at them over and over again. And go, that's why he posted that way.
Yeah, that's not. I'm being careful
awesome.
Who I teach this to because I kind of want to hit it on a bunch of people before I have to teach it.
I hit an arm in north-south choke.
Oh, nice.
Because I was like, Marcelo could do it, and then I had to squeeze super hard, and I was like, man, Marcelo made this look way easier than I did. And I taught it to one of our guys who's like 6'5" and has an enormous wingspan. I was like, try this. And he squeezed like, oh no.
Yeah.
I was like, he's like, I feel good.
Sometimes you teach it to the wrong person.
I did. And immediately as I showed him that, I went, oh no, I don't know why I just decided to teach you this. Because this is about to be a problem for a bunch of people. If you decide that you like this move, this is about to be an enormous problem. I hope he's going to Naga coming up, and I hope that he brings it to that Naga and just like crunches it. I got a couple of my guys that are primarily no-gi guys that are going to Naga that I'm like, hey man, throw the gi on. You're already there. $20. And I think 2 of them are doing it.
Really?
2 or 3 of them are doing it, and I'm just like, yes. I'm so
debating,
excited.
I was debating doing that Naga. I might.
I'm gonna be there to coach because I have a lot of my guys from both the club and then the regular gym going. And it's
the men's absolute bracket's a money bracket.
I know, yeah, and I'm like old and my back is broken.
Yeah, but it depends on who's in the bracket.
It does depend on who's in the bracket.
If it's a bunch of
Miranda,
blue belts in the bracket.
I'm gonna look at it. Because be quiet. Because this is my plan after the show is to look at who's in that bracket and go, I'll pay a registration for that bracket. Haven't competed at black belt yet. Like time to see what's up. So here in the Baltimore area and want to go watch a team compete at Naga. Again, we're out here. Miranda, any kind of closing thoughts on the day?
Nope, that's it.
All right, so in 2 weeks, we'll get this card. Again, we'll preview the rest of the card next week, so look out for that. As always on the show, I'm your host, Maine, so I'm co-host
Miranda.
And we have the Grappling Miranda, and that's what it is. Stay safe. If you like the show, please consider sharing it on Facebook with the folks at your gym. It's the best way that we grow the show, and we really appreciate it. You can reach out to us on email.
We also have Instagram. We have Facebook. We have Twitter. We have Google+.
Until that shuts down.
We have a website.
If you have an event you would like to have us cover, please let us know. If you have a name, like most people do, and you'd like to have us stop butchering it,
let us know.
Reach out to us. The show is also available on YouTube, Spotify, in addition to iTunes and every other podcast service. We very much appreciate your time, and thank you.